Right now, somewhere in the dark, a moth is throwing itself into a flame, over and over, burning its own wings off, and it cannot stop, because every instinct it has is screaming the wrong thing. A deer smells smoke on the wind and bolts. A wolf sees the orange glow between the trees and turns and runs. Every animal in the dark, every single one, is built to flee that light. It means death. It has always meant death. And then there is you. You see the same flame, and you lean in. You reach for it. You feed it. You carry it. You build your entire life in a ring around it. You are the one animal on earth that walks toward the fire. Nobody ever told you how strange that is. Every creature alive is born, terrified of the one thing you spend your evenings staring into for comfort. Every wild animal on the planet runs from fire on pure instinct, no lesson needed, and you, a soft, slow, clawless ape, override the oldest fear in biology and pick the burning thing up in your hands. So here's the question that should genuinely stop you. Why are you the only animal that runs toward the one thing everything else runs from? And stranger, much stranger, why can you no longer live without it? Because that is the part nobody mentions. This is not a story about a clever animal that learned a neat trick. By the end of this, you're going to understand that walking toward that flame was the single most important thing your ancestors ever did. That it reached into your body and quietly rebuilt you from the teeth inward, and that you did not tame fire at all. Fire tamed you, and there is no going back. Start with the fear, because the fear is the whole miracle. Fire is the oldest no in the living world. For hundreds of millions of years, everything that ever crawled or swam or flew has learned one flat rule about the bright, hot thing. And the rule is simple. Get near it and you die. So life did the sensible thing. It wrote the terror in at the deepest level, below thought, below learning. A creature that has never once seen a flame will still panic at it the first time, because the fear is not taught, it is inherited. Fire is the one danger so absolute that evolution did not trust any animal to figure it out on its own. And that is what makes the next thing almost impossible to believe. Somewhere, some soft-skinned ancestor of yours stood in front of that universal, hardwired, hundreds of millions of years old terror and did not run. So how does one fragile animal reach into the single deepest fear that life has and switch it off? We do not know his name, and we never will, but we know roughly when it happened, and it is so long ago that the word ancient does not cover it. This is not cavemen. Cavemen are practically your neighbors compared to this. Go back more than 1,000,000 years, back before there were people who looked anything like you, to a heavier, wilder creature with a smaller skull, standing on two legs on an old African plain. Lightning splits a tree, or a brush fire rolls through, and where every other animal for 100 miles is fleeing. This one thing walks up to the edge of the burning grass, and instead of running, it takes a branch that is still glowing, and it keeps the fire alive. That is the moment. That is the hinge the entire rest of your life swings on. And for a staggering length of time, far longer than all of recorded history stacked end to end, your ancestors could not even make fire. They could only keep it. A flame caught from a lightning strike or a burning plane had to be fed, shielded, and carried. A single living coal cupped in the hands and guarded on the move for days, for months, sometimes passed down for years, without ever once being allowed to die. Whole groups kept a person whose one sacred job was the fire, because if it went out, you could not just strike a new one. You went cold. You went back to raw. You went back to being soft meat in the dark until you found another burning tree and worked up the nerve to rob it again. So think about what these creatures actually were. They befriended the one thing all of life flees, and then they became its keepers, nursing it like a fragile animal, haunted by the thought of the morning it might go out. And the strangest part is what all of that cost, because sitting next to a thing that can kill you, feeding it, guarding it through every night, is an insane amount of effort and risk. So it had to be buying something enormous. What could possibly be worth befriending death? The answer is food, but not in the way you think. Watch what a gorilla actually does with its day. It is a huge, powerful animal, and it spends most of its waking life chewing. Hours and hours of it, jaws grinding through mountains of raw leaves, because raw food is stubborn. It is tough, it fights back, and it gives up its energy slowly and stingily. A body running on raw has to dedicate an enormous gut and half its day just to breaking dinner down. Now put that food over a flame. Heat does the chewing for you. It bursts the cells, softens the fibers, unravels the proteins, and it kills most of the things living in the meat that would otherwise make you sick. Cooking is pre-digestion. It is your stomach reaching outside your body and doing the hardest part of the work before the food ever touches your teeth. Suddenly, the same mouthful gives you far more energy for far less effort, and it gives it fast. Your ancestor did not just find a warm place to sit, he found a way to start digesting his food in the world instead of in his own belly. And once a body stops paying that enormous tax, what does it do with everything it just saved? This is where fire climbs inside you and starts rearranging the furniture. Because a body is a strict accountant, and it does not carry anything it is not using. When cooked food started pouring in easy calories, the huge ape gut was suddenly overkill, so it shrank. The massive grinding molars were overkill, so the teeth got smaller. The powerful jaw was overkill, and a gene that built giant chewing muscles in your ancestors broke and switched off over 2 million years ago, so the whole face pulled in and softened. You are, right now, walking around with the small teeth, the weak jaw, and the short gut of an animal that assumes its food arrives cooked. Fire did not just change the menu. It reached into the blueprint and redrew your skull. And all that saved energy, all that freed up fuel that used to go into chewing and digesting, it had somewhere new to go. It went to the most expensive object in the known universe, your brain. That lump of gray tissue is about 2% of your weight, and it quietly eats around a fifth of all the energy you burn, just sitting there, doing nothing you can feel. It is a metabolic monster, and no animal running on raw leaves could ever afford to grow one this big. There is a hard trade buried in every body, a fixed budget, and you cannot pay for a giant brain and a giant gut at the same time. Something has to give. Fire is what let your ancestors make the trade. The cooked calories funded the shrinking of the gut, and the shrinking of the gut funded the swelling of the brain, generation after generation, until a modest ape on a dusty plain was carrying around the most complex thing biology has ever built. The fire outside the body paid for the light switching on inside it, which raises a question you're not going to like the answer to. If fire built this body, what happens when you take the fire away? You die. Not quickly, not dramatically, but you do. And this is the part that should genuinely unsettle you, because you have been raised to think of cooking as a luxury, a nicety, a thing you could drop if you had to and go back to eating like a natural animal. You cannot. When scientists studied people who eat nothing but raw food, even in the modern world with the best produce money can buy, the bodies started failing in a quiet, specific way. People could not hold their weight. Many of the women stopped being able to have children, their bodies deciding there was not enough spare energy to risk it. And that is with grocery stores and blenders and delivery trucks. Drop a raw food human into the actual wild, with only what nature hands over uncooked, and they would weaken and starve, while every dumb predator around them thrives on the exact same meat, eaten raw, no problem at all. Read that again. You are the one animal that cannot survive on what the planet actually provides. You have been so thoroughly rebuilt around the flame that the raw world is no longer enough to keep you alive. So let me ask it plainly. Between you and the fire, which one is really in charge? Here is where you have to turn the whole story over, because you have had it backwards from the start. You think of this as the great human triumph. Man conquers fire. Man masters the flame, bends it to his will, uses it as a tool. But look at what actually happened. Fire walked into your ancestors' lives and shrank their teeth, weakened their jaws, hollowed out their guts, ballooned their brains, and stripped away their ability to ever feed themselves raw again. It reshaped your species so completely, so intimately, from the inside, that you can never leave it. A wolf can walk away from you and be fine. You cannot walk away from fire and live. That is not what mastery looks like. That is what domestication looks like. We did not tame fire. Fire tamed us. It found a clever, hungry animal, made itself indispensable, rewired that animal's entire body around its warmth, and turned a wild ape into a creature that would tend it, feed it, and carry it to the ends of the earth forever. The thing you thought you had captured is the thing that captured you. And once it had you, it made you dangerous. The same flame that softened your food also sharpened your weapons. Your ancestors learned to hold a wooden spear in the coals until its tip turned hard as bone, and then, more than 100,000 years ago, they learned that heating certain stones before shaping them made the rock flake into edges finer and deadlier than anything cold stone could give. The soft ape with no claws and no fangs walked out of the firelight holding fire-hardened points, and the animals that used to hunt it suddenly had something of their own to fear. And then fire did the thing that scattered your kind across the whole planet. You are a tropical animal. Your bare skin, your missing fur, all of it says you were built for somewhere warm. By every rule of biology, you should have stayed on that African plain and died the first time you wandered too far north. Instead, you carried the fire with you. You walked into winters that should have frozen you solid, across ice and mountain and frozen coast, alive inside a little bubble of heat you made with your own hands. And you kept walking until a tropical ape had somehow colonized a frozen world. There's almost nowhere a human lives today that we could survive a single winter night without fire. You are everywhere you were never meant to be, and the flame is the only reason. But the greatest thing fire handed over was not a weapon or a warm night in the snow. It pushed back the dark. For the whole history of life before this, when the sun went down, the night belonged to the things with big eyes and long teeth, and a soft ape on the ground was just meat waiting for morning. But a predator will not cross a ring of fire. So the flame bought your ancestors something no animal had ever owned: a safe night. The one time your kind could lie down in the open, defenseless, eyes closed, and not be eaten, was inside that circle of light. The fire stood guard so the body could finally rest. And it did something even bigger than that. It gave you hours. The sun used to run your whole schedule, but firelight tacked a few glowing hours onto the end of every single day, a stretch of time that was warm and safe and had nothing that needed doing. And when people study the last groups on Earth who still live around a nightly fire, they find something remarkable. In the daylight, the talk is all business, food, and tools, and who did what. But at night, in the firelight, the talk changes. It turns to stories, to the people who are gone, to spirits, to things that never happened, to the far away and the long ago. The imagination only comes out after dark, around the flame. So where does a warm, safe, useless stretch of nightly hours, spent telling each other stories, eventually lead? To everything. To all of it. That fire-lit hour is where your ancestors first practiced living inside their own heads, telling of the hunt that had not happened yet, the ancestor who was already dead, the world beyond the hills they would never see. Language got room to stretch. Myth was born. A shared imagination, a thing no other animal has ever had, first flickered to life in the light of a fire, in the safe, warm hours that the fire alone made possible. Your species did not invent culture in a lab or a library. You invented it sitting in a ring around a flame, in the dark, kept alive by the very thing that every other creature on Earth was fleeing that same night. Which finally, after all of it, answers the question we started with. Why do you walk toward the fire when everything else runs? Because you are not looking at a threat. You are looking at home. For 1,000,000 years and more, every ancestor you have ever had was born beside a fire, fed by a fire, kept alive through the night by a fire, and they passed down, along with the small teeth and the big brain, a quiet, unspoken trust in the flame that no other animal could ever afford to feel. The moth flies into the light and dies. You lean toward it, and something in you unclenches, because 100,000 generations of your blood learn that this particular light means you made it. You are safe. You are among your own. The fear that every other animal carries, you were born without. That absence is your inheritance. It is the oldest gift your kind ever received. and you feel it every time you stare into a candle and go calm and cannot say why. Your ancestors sensed the weight of this long before anyone could explain a single word of it. Look at the oldest stories your species tells, all across the world, told by people who never once met each other, and you keep stumbling onto the same story. Fire was stolen from the gods, or handed down by them, and it is the one thing that lifted humans up out of the animal world and made them into something else. Almost every culture on Earth carries some version of that myth, and here is the unsettling part. They were right. Fire really did separate you from the animals. It just did not happen on some mountain of the gods in a single blazing moment. It happened slowly, quietly, in your teeth and your gut and your swelling skull, across 1,000,000 years of ordinary nights. And it never ended. That is the thing to hold on to. You did not stop being the fire animal when you moved indoors. Every flame you have ever used is the same flame, the same trick, just scaled and hidden. The stove is fire. The engine in a car is a fire, a controlled explosion happening hundreds of times a second. The power plant humming somewhere over the horizon is a great fire, burning something ancient to push light down a wire. Fire was the first energy your kind ever commanded that did not come out of your own muscles. And everything you have built since, every machine, every city, every rocket clawing off the planet, is that first stolen campfire grown up. In nearly 4 billion years of life on this world, through every creature that ever lived, exactly one line of animals ever reached out and took the fire. And you are what it became. So here is the whole bargain, laid out flat. Your ancestors gave up the ability to eat the raw world, and in exchange, they got a safe night, a longer day, a bigger brain, a shared imagination, a voice, a story, a species. They traded the wild for the flame, and they could never trade back, and neither can you. You're not a natural animal that happens to like cooking. You are a creature that was built by fire, in every sense, down to the shape of your jaw and the size of your thoughts, and you have been carrying its warmth in your body since before your kind even had a name. Look at the light you're staring into right now. This screen, glowing in your hands, is being lit by a fire. Somewhere out past the edge of the city, something is burning so that this light can reach your eyes, exactly the way something burned in the dark 1,000,000 years ago, so that a frightened ape could see the faces of the others and feel, for one night, safe. Nothing has changed. You're still sitting in the ring of light, still leaning toward the warmth, still telling stories after dark to keep the black at bay. You never conquered the fire. You never wanted to. You just never got up and walked away from it. If this made you look at the flame on your stove a little differently, subscribe. Every video here takes one ordinary thing your body does and finds the ancient animal still doing it inside you.